And at the time, I was a college student, and I was not a runner, but I was a pretty good athlete. And I got interested in this sport because I went to the finish line of a marathon, and I saw everybody coming across that finish line. And they looked like you guys. And frankly, I really wasn't all that impressed at the time. And I said, I mean, come on, if these people can do it, how hard can this be? And by the way, they didn't look good coming over that finish line at all. So I said, I'm finishing this thing, and I'm going to look strong at the end. So I went out and did some training, and I think my longest run was 11 or 12 miles. And so I came to the starting line of the marathon that year, and this guy next to me said, what time are you going to run? And I hadn't thought about that, and I said, what's a good time? And he said, anything under 3 hours is a very good time. And 3 hours is a little under 7-minute miles. And so I said, okay. And so I took off running, and you know, every mile they tell you the time, and so I started clicking off just under 7-minute miles, and it was very easy. I felt great, beautiful morning. And the other weird thing is, not only at every mile do they tell you your time, but at every mile they had a big table covered with cups with water and some sort of sports drink in it. And the great thing is that I heard the mile time as I'd run through, and there'd be like 20 or 30 people stopped at these tables every mile. So I would pass 20 or 30 people in about 10 seconds every mile. And when I started to get to mile 10 and 11, there were more and more people at these water stops, and I began to kind of estimate the numbers and figure out how many people started in front of me, because I thought if enough people stopped at these water tables, I might have a chance of winning this race. And I got to about mile 16, and I saw a van on the side with the marathon logo on it, and some runners were getting in that van. And I asked this other guy who was next to me at the time what that was, and he said, this is called the sag wagon. And this is for people who aren't going to finish the race, they run out of gas, and they get in this van. And I said, well, what happens? And he said, well, they take them to the finish line, and then they get out and go to their cars and go home. And I remember asking the guy, can you imagine anything more embarrassing than getting out of a van at the finish line, instead of running across the finish line, getting out of a van and having in front of the crowd and have everybody seeing you? And he said, oh, it's worse than that. In the race publication, when they put everybody's times, they put your name and they put the initials DNF for did not finish. And that goes out to, like, you know, the whole world gets to see that. And I said, I don't know, I'd kill myself before that happened. I just can't imagine that. Well, this race was in Houston, Texas, and it was a little bit hot and humid that day, and since I had been literally accelerating through the water stops, I was a little bit dehydrated. And by mile 22, I got these things called muscle cramps, and muscle cramps are when your muscle contracts, but they won't let go. And when that happens in your arms, you know, you just go like this, but if it ever happens in your legs, you have to kind of curl up like a baby in a fetal position and lie down in the street, which is exactly what I did. And then, of course, the sag wagon was nice enough to come along and pick me up and take me to the finish line. And for the second consecutive year, I got to watch you guys cross that finish line, and I had an IV in my arm. They were very nice. They got some fluids in me there. And that whole story happened even though I was probably in better shape, not running shape and certainly not mental shape, of a lot of people in that race. I was a good athlete. This sport is not about who's the fastest, who's the strongest, who's the most gifted physically. This sport is about overcoming an obstacle with your mind as much as your body. And when you learn the principles of hydration, for instance, that this program is going to teach you, that alone would have fixed that problem in that race. And there's 20 other things that you can know to improve you and give you better performance. And really, what we're really after is to make you a happier, stronger, fitter person. We don't really care if you do the marathon at the end of this. That's not really our interest. Our interest is that you get the most out of yourself as a person.